Welcome to the ABSA Business Day Supplier Development Dialogues. Thank you for joining us today as we laud the companies that are really stretching themselves to use supplier development as a lever to build winning, long-lasting supply chains. I'm Joanne Joseph. These awards were created to promote supplier development and skills transfer throughout the sector. But they're also a way to highlight the strides that can be made when the industry collaborates and sets high standards in benchmarking supplier development good practice. Join this growing network of companies and contribute to a sustainable economy through supplier development. Just go to www.sdawards.co.za. Now, this is the first time we're back with you after the recent unrest and looting that hit the country hard in so many ways, not least from the point of view of small businesses, many of which will have to start again from scratch if they're even able to at all. But this month in particular, we're calling our discussion What Women Want, because we know that women, with their multitasking ability among many other talents, make great entrepreneurs and business people if given the right support. Now, we want to see women increasingly join the supplier development chain, but what are the factors that hold them back, and what sort of support is required to ensure women-owned businesses thrive? We've assembled a really insightful panel to have this discussion today. You'll meet our panelists shortly, but first, let me remind you that we have a live chat function where you can put your questions directly to the members of the panel. Please indicate who your question is for, and I'll do my best to pose that question towards the end of our discussion. So let's introduce you to our panelists right now. Michal Pillay is Senior Manager of Supplier Diversity at ABSA Group Limited. Sikai Chiwandamira is the Regional Chapter Manager of Andy at Aspen Institute. Chantal de Kock is General Manager at Fatola. Violet Lupuana is founding owner and MD of Jumile Holdings, and Khati Lenkala is Executive Manager of the Corporate Services Division at the Transport and Education Training Authority. Welcome to each of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm going to start by tackling the social and cultural contexts, which we don't often bother to take into account when we speak about business in isolation, because there are real constraints which are often ignored when women are trying to start businesses, run and grow them. So, Michal, let me start with you here. You are of Indian descent. You're a single mom to 3 sons, I understand. What have you had to overcome socially and culturally to become a successful businesswoman?
Thanks, Joanne. Being Indian has its own cultural challenges. I'm Christian Indian, which is an even more interesting combination. I think when I got divorced around some 15 years ago, my dad said to me that a woman should always exist under the authority of a male figure. And according to his opinion, I was also not allowed to remarry. So my dad stepped up and offered to fill the financial guidance role. He was genuine in his concern and offer, but I, on the other hand, wasn't so enthusiastic about the proposed arrangement. He was so upset at my refusal that he took me straight to the office of our pastor to get him to change my mind. My mind wasn't changed and hasn't changed since. My father is not changed either. My mom, for instance, has never owned a banking account until a few years ago when I took her through to open her first one. My dad was quite flabbergasted. He saw this as unnecessary. He had a bank account and he felt it was all she needed. My mom had never completed an application form by herself before, and I think she hasn't done one since. So as you can see, the consensus in my family is that women exist under the leadership of men and they're not equal to them. So here we are 15 years later, and I have grown kids. And I still will never be an elder in my family purely because of my marital status. So I lead in the office and I lead at home. I've obviously not been able to be a strong role model to my son, mostly because I'm female. And the myth that women can't raise men still exists strongly in my culture. So instead, I raised my son smart enough to know what good looks like and identify men who have these qualities and work hard to achieve the same. In addition, they are aware that they are raised in a single parent, female-led home. So they do know how to appreciate and value women. And they've experienced firsthand that a woman can and will achieve as much as their male counterparts. I believe this will set them apart in the corporate world. They don't come in with the historical, cultural misconceptions many men have due to their background. My boys have seen that their mother has succeeded and therefore will trust that the women are equal.
Incredible story, really, Michal. Chantal, you are also an outstanding example of what it is to grow up in a severely under-resourced society. Just give me a bit of background as to what you had to overcome to elevate yourself to break the mold.
Thank you, Joanne. Coming from the Cape Flats, which is an incredibly beautiful, rich in heritage, and highly complex area, it is also an incredibly harsh environment for a woman. Coming from a family where the majority of the male figures were gangsters, you learn from a very young age what the expected and the accepted role of a woman is. And it is not one of leadership. And this is evident in many other structures, be it your traditional family units, religious institutions, even gang units. The reality is that there are still so few women in leadership positions. And this must change. We have to have more examples of success and role models for women. And so the spaces that we hold as women, be it on this panel or other women in leadership, is really, really important because by leading and showing up authentically, we actually give other women permission to do the same. Now, stepping outside of traditional roles really leaves you isolated, and you end up being ostracized. And ironically, this has not been my experience in my career and my professional capacity, but very much in social structures. And this is a challenge that many women still face today.
It's sad and it's really disturbing, but how does your background inform the work you do on a daily basis, Chantal?
So I'm incredibly grateful for my background. What it has taught me is resilience. I've had to really dig deep to come up with solutions. And this is particularly relevant in today's context where the world over has changed. You know, business as usual is no longer um, acceptable. You have to dig deep. And this is really, my background has really allowed me to bring that innovation, to think creatively, to work with what you have, to bring those solutions forward.
Yeah. Zakai, you're also passionate about the inclusion of women in business leadership and transformation, which we know are often sticking points in the business world. How does your background feed into your commitment to transform the business landscape, Zakai?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joanne. So, picking up from my experience, we are now beginning to see African young female leaders below the age of 35 emerging, such as myself. And mind you, this is despite the deeply ingrained gaps relating to harmful social norms, blatant sexism, which I've had to experience, discrimination, xenophobia, unconscious bias, and cultural stereotypes that have limited the expectations of what I, as a young African female leader, can or should do. So, that being said, culture and leadership are inextricably linked. So, whenever I have challenged norms and expectations, culture has always come into play. And, I just want to pick up on a practical example. I never forget the first time I was appointed as one of the youngest African female leaders in a multinational company at the age of 26. And mind you, this was in a very male dominated sector. A lot of people asked me, and these were old ladies as well, how I managed to do it. And I was startled at that question. But my response was simple. I dreamt big, and my dreams did not scare me. So, the main ingredient to that recipe of climbing the corporate ladder, but also speaking at inclusion and transformation, is that I was not afraid to challenge those norms and expectations. I stayed true to myself as a female who comes from a patriarchal society, I was born in Zimbabwe, so as many of you are aware, that's how the things are. But my passion and zeal to make a difference made me look over the barriers which society has established. Now, I wanted to say it doesn't matter whether you are a business leader from South Africa, Nigeria, Brazil, or any part of the world. The role of the leader is the same everywhere, and that is to optimize the success of your organization. So, in fact, we are the captain of the ships. And what I've done in every organization that I've been fortunate to work for, and mainly most of those have been global, but with the focus on sub Saharan Africa, is to use culture in helping achieve change and build organizations based on that. So, just to close, Joanne, I hope you don't mind, but I just want to get real because I think this is what our topic and our dialogue is all about. So, what I found is, you know, being a foreign African female leader, trying to lead in a number of instances completely foreign organizations and programs. The only constant with that is that I've had to work with people from different cultures. So unconscious bias has always been present. But guess what? I've had to take the time to understand the rules of the game. The one card I've picked relates to expectations, and the other card speaks to norms. So essentially, cultural awareness and emotional intelligence have informed the decisions which I have made, not as a leader, but as an effective one. Thank you, Joanne.
So, Guy, thank you so much for that. I just want to probe one part of that you've mentioned. I mean, obviously, these are very hostile spaces for women in many contexts, right? So you walk in there and there's a kind of, you spoke of unconscious bias, but there's a kind of intersectional bias as well. You're being judged on a lot of things. You're being judged on your sex, on your race, perhaps from a classist point of view as well. How does one deal with the kind of hostility that you sometimes experience in these male-dominated environments, where people are quite open about the fact, or perhaps even covert, in not wanting you to succeed, and in making it quite clear to you that they don't think you belong in that leadership position?
Yeah, it's a difficult journey. And I think often at times it's a bit of a roller coaster. But I want to emphasize that you need to stay true to who you are. And that's what's helped me, staying true to who I am. I have ensured that I try as much as possible to shape the behavior of society towards me, the values I expect. So if I've sat in a boardroom negotiating major transactions, don't think I'm there just to tick the box, the woman empowerment scorecard, right? Hear me out. Offer me the opportunity because guess what? Most of the times we've been in the background drafting these agreements. Also, what I always advocate for is treat me with respect and dignity and don't make assumptions about me. We often allow people to disrespect us. We often allow people to make assumptions and they get away with it, right? But that is the outfit that I walk around wearing. And I'm not going to lie, that is what has got me this far as an African female leader and will get me further. So, to conclude on this point, I want to say something that's a little bit controversial. And this is to all the aspiring and female leaders. And that is stop trying to lean in and think like a man, act like a woman. What is unique about each and every one of you is that you were created to simultaneously balance a leadership role and a hands on personal life. And I think that's the mistake that we make as African female leaders. We are trying to be, the queen bee, and then we forget that we've got our personal lives. So look at your circumstances, your skills, your traits, your dreams, and just own it. And I've realized that often it's the environment, culture, society, or even the business that needs to change and not me. But what is important is how do I use those skills and the talents that I have as an individual, unique African female, to challenge that and bring about that change. Thank you, Joanne.
Zika, I think you've shared some really brilliant points there. And Michal, can I just probe that with you for a moment, please? Because this whole idea of aligning ourselves as leaders wherever we are, whether it is in the public life, whether it is in a private sector leadership, or whether it's in one's private capacity, how important is that, aligning one's sense of power across those media? Because I mean, I know exactly what you've experienced personally, Michal. The expectation is that as an Indian woman, you are going to be submissive, you are going to be demure, and how do you manage to balance that across the various parts of your life, Michal?
I think what Sakai mentioned was, owning your power, and arriving at the table with the intention of being heard, not just arriving there to tick the box. And with obviously the scorecard, that is a lot of times what the expectation is. And being able to balance your personal life as well as your work life and the role that you play in both of these spheres. I'm lucky enough to not have to go home and take on the submissive role. So I am a leader overall in the spaces that I own. And that is it, exactly it. You need to own the spaces and show up really to have your portion be heard.
Violet, I love it that you've marched directly into the male-dominated industries like trucking, logistics, and supply chain, and you've really emerged as a forerunner. What's it taken to achieve this, Violet?
I believe, thank you very much. For me, it's about challenging the status quo. So, for instance, I started my transport company within the taxi industry, and that already is known to be notorious and bully for men and older men. And all my life, when I look back, and I realized that every time I was told I cannot do it, they actually fuel me with a drive to want to prove them wrong. So even with the transport sector, I said, you know what, that's an industry that makes billions of rand within our country. So why can't we go and participate in that industry? Why should we allow the status quo of saying no, it's for older men, uneducated men, it's unruly? But I took on the challenge to say, with my professional background, let me go into it, and also with my entrepreneurial drive, I will start there. And at that time, my goal was to end up in the freight and logistics, which I eventually did. So I thought, okay, so what can I do to get to the freight and logistics? So, for instance, to own a truck, one truck is 1.5 million to own just the head, excluding the trailer. But it's about having a mindset of not saying, it's impossible to own this truck, but what can I do with what I have at that time to get me to achieve my dream of owning a truck and trucks in the future? So for me, it was more about challenging that status quo and also doing with what I had at that time to get to my dream business.
Yeah. So Violet, I'm trying to understand what it must have been like for you as a woman to pitch up with your resources. They may have been limited, but your determination was clearly boundless. How were you received within the industry?
So at that time, when I started knocking in 2010, and they only opened the door in 2014. So, and at that time, 2010, it was World Cup, and they told us, no, they're not taking any new members. And I think the fact that you're also a woman, how dare you come into this notorious industry? But it took persistence, and like all women are, we're very persistent when we want something. So I kept on going back, and then they'll close the door, and then I kept on knocking until I got my break in 2014, and that's when they opened doors for me. And then also with the tracking, it's known to be white male dominated. And even amongst our peers, they'll tell you, no, rather go and subcontract under them, or rather, or you see even the tenders that they put out, they're like 20 trucks and whatnot. But I said to myself, you know what? I will start with one and I'll work my way to the 20 trucks. So it's yet again about being told that you can't, and then using that to fuel me to get what I want. So anytime, even like when I look back in history, every time I got told, like for instance, when I was doing engineering, there was this particular subject called mechanics, and they told us only 5% of students will pass, and that alone presented a hurdle too. And there was lots of us in the class. And I said to myself, I'll be that 5%. So every time I experience such hurdles where people want to close doors for me, I use that. Like the principle of saying use the stones as stepping stones instead of hindrances. So I took those stones, then they threw at me, and then I used them to just build stepping stones to where I am right now.
So such a story of determination. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Violet. Khatile, we've been very patiently waiting to hear from you in studio. One of the first things I learned about you is that you've got a Toastmasters background.
I do, yes.
And that said to me, you value the notion of women having a voice in public spaces. How important is that to you, Khatile?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joanne. Women in our society, we've always been put at the back. And it's always a fight to go to the front. Now, we've been socialized like that. But when I joined companies and I started my career, it became increasingly important because I'm a fighter, I always want to lead. It became increasingly important, and it became very clear that it's difficult for a woman to take up that position, to show up and to maintain this fight so that you can be heard, so that you can be seen, so that you can make a difference. But I must say that that fight always paid off. I used those hurdles as stepping stones. For example, I have worked in the transport industry for a long time, for over 30 years. And I have managed to grow myself from low levels right up to executive, and have worked into board echelons.
Yeah.
But it has not been easy, Joanne. You can imagine. We just know, even now, in 2021, that the transport industry is polarized. It's male-dominated, and back then it was racially polarized. So just to enter, incorporate, to assume a role, it was very difficult. But I fought, and I was resilient. But I also must say that I was seen and supported by a man. My first position as a manager was because a man recognized what I had, which was hard work. And I proved, but that's the other thing. Joanne, you have to prove yourself unendingly so. In boardrooms, I realized that I worked twice as hard, other than my male counterparts. At some point, I was the only female in the executive for a long time in the aviation sector. And I had to work very hard. Working hard meant that I had to push barriers. When you fight to be recognized, it also means that I had to now dig deep and fight my fights and go straight on, which is breaking a stereotype, because always women are painted with a brush that says, oh, they will always accept. They socialize to be accepting and rather work from the back and solve problems. But I had to go to the front and fight this fight, to an extent that I used to say to my counterparts in the executive boardroom, we would be working very hard late at night, and I'd say to them, you know, when you get home, Joe, your wife is going to serve you food on the tray. When I get home, I will serve my husband the food on the tray. So that just shows you that as a leader, I had to fight those fights in the boardroom. But I always remembered at home that I always had to assume this role of being a nurturer, a strategist at home, and a person who always fights for the family as well and makes sure that we survive.
You know, that the attitude you took to rising within the corporate world, it's a difficult decision to make, isn't it, Khatile? Because on the one hand, you can be seen as that sort of the troublemaking woman, you know, who doesn't accept her position, and is therefore becomes unpopular because of what she demands, what she feels she is entitled to in that position. It can be very career limiting. How do you balance that, picking your battles? Or do you just say, I'm going full throttle? This is what I want. I want this position. I'll do what I have to do to get it.
Joanne, it's actually a mixture of both. You have to know yourself. You have to be passionate about who you are and be passionate about what you want. But always remember your vision in your fight and employ different strategies to get you there. Now, the reason I say it's a mixture of both, there were times when I decided I am fighting this on, and I would go full throttle and fight the fight. I was always in the human resources, skills development, transformation, all these labels or professions that are given to women. But I never looked down on that and said, because I'm a woman now, they give me HR. I saw it as my contribution to making a change. And because of my hard work and how I looked at what the change should be in the transport sector, I realized that I actually have a lot of power. And let me connect with people that will help me to make this transformation and to make this change for the women that are there with me and for the women that will follow when I leave. And I'm happy actually when I look back to all the hard work that has now transformed the industry and the different sectors that are industry, the vast industry as it is at the moment, that there are now women that are both in supplier development or that are occupying different roles in the leadership of those organizations in the transport sector. It is a long road, but for me, as a person who's passionate, I believe that let's not hang the towel. Let's not put away those things that we used to fight the fight. The fight is still there. You know, this fight changes complexion. Today, it shows itself as a way you fight the fight full throttle. Tomorrow, it's now a fight of the mind. It's a battle of the mind. They will deal with you in your mind, and you have to be able to be strong. You have to be able to show up. You have to be able to fight this fight, and you have to say to those men, and sometimes it's the women, Joanne, take me for who I am. I am here to make my contribution to this place where I believe with my skills and with my personality and with my package that I bring, I will make the difference.
You know, you mentioned quite a few important things then. I want to pick up on one of those thoughts a little bit later on, the importance of having female allies within the organization like you. Thank you for that, Khatile. Violet, back to you. I want to get into some of the nitty-gritties now of the kind of things that hold women back in business. There are so many factors we don't think about, like childcare, care for elderly members of the family, lack of transport, unsupportive, perhaps violent spouses, so many other issues which can easily stymie a woman's progress in business. Violet, do you think we're adequately addressing these important issues when we help a woman to start a business?
Thank you very much. With regards to starting a business, I believe what is important is for one to know yourself and to take stock of who you are, what you have, and what can you do. And then now when you've taken stock of who you are as a woman and what you can produce, whether a product or a service, then looking into who are you producing for, then choose that target market that you want to produce for, whether a service or a product. And I cannot emphasize how important just doing that market research is for us as women entrepreneurs. So for any entrepreneur, in fact. So I was speaking to a couple of ladies this weekend, and I was saying there's this thing that I've seen where people want to do business, whether it's Xhosa, it's Tutu, and the I'll call it. So they want to do business traditionally, and by that I mean people will just stock up on, let's say, herbal products or medication or clothes, and then want to give it to you and say, pay me at the end of the month. And I was saying, as a business development specialist, because I'm also a mentor, and in as much as I'm an entrepreneur as well, I said, I have the responsibility to teach our people to do business correctly. You cannot just stock up things and then want to shove it down to people and say, please support my business. Even this whole concept of support our own. I said we need to move away from that concept of we're being supported, because now it gives us leniency, or you find that people don't perform to a high standard because they're being supported. It's like the position that the media has placed Africa, that Africa needs handouts. So I don't even like that whole support your own. If you do, and I want to reiterate what the ladies are saying, do business with me as a business person. So if the moment you say support, then I expect them to understand my poor quality and whatnot. And that does not really help us to up our game as small enterprises. So whether women, whether not, but I really want to, and personally, I do challenge women to say it is very important that you, like for me, I'm servicing clients like the Coca-Colas, the Absens, the SABs. When they look at me, they don't say, I'm shame, we'll understand if she doesn't have a tax clearance. No, do not even accept that shame thing. So know who you are and give the best. So, like the guy was saying, yes, they may take me on whether it's a tick box or BEE, but once you're in, give them the A game. Give them your A game such that they'll say, I don't want to let go of Kumile anymore. So that's what we specialize on as Kumile Holdings. Say, it's fine say they take us on because we're black, because we're women, because we're youth. But that is not our unique selling proposition. Let us perform like with the start of Coca-Cola. So in that way, you find that they started, can't you also do this for me? Can you, because you're so reliable, because your service is so excellent, they want to go beyond what you're offering. And then now looking within yourself, before saying, yes, I can do this also for you. Because for instance, we do transportation, then others say, can you also now procure stationery for us? Can you also now do courier service for us? You need to take stock and say, what do I have as a woman? What do I have as a team? And can we deliver? Because you don't now want to fail them with stationery when they trusted you with transport. You delivered an A game with transport, now with stationery, you're doing a sloppy job. So I say to venture into business, you need to know yourself, your capability, the capability of your team, and then give the best game ever. Let them don't accept action. Don't accept the whole supporting my own thing. No, they're not supporting you. They're doing business with a fellow business person. Thank you.
You're a serious businesswoman, Violet. On that note, when funding is devised for small business women who could contribute to the supply chain, Chantel, are the additional social pressures like childcare, for example, as one small example, be taken into account? Or are the funding models still designed fairly generically, perhaps more appropriately to the lifestyle of male entrepreneurs?
Yes, this is definitely one of the interesting challenges I think that a lot of business development solutions face. The reality is that women have unique challenges, and these include your what is termed the double burden or the domestic female burden, where in reality, and I think the recent stats that I looked at showed that women perform for every hour that a male performs domestic duties, women perform 8 hours. And that is shocking. So the reality is when women step into business and participate in business development programs, there is constraint on the time, on mind share, for them to fully participate and really, really benefit from these initiatives, because they are being split in so many different areas. I think there is a lot of work that can still be done to support women. Although I would say that with a lot of the support that I have seen where there has been tremendous value has been around providing coaching support, because there is a lot of conversation that is taking place in circles where women are only just starting to discover themselves, finding their own voice, and understanding who they are as individuals. Because it's very difficult for you to lead without knowing that. You cannot lead authentically if you don't know who you are, if you haven't been able to find that inner voice and bring that authentically to the table. So I would say there's still quite a bit of work to be done around that, but definitely coaching specifically for women, and then mentorship, making sure that you actually have the right mentor, a mentor that understands the context of business that you are operating in, a mentor that understands the complexity that comes with being a female, so that you are able to receive the support and the guidance and the direction and the sounding board that is appropriate to your needs. And so, yes, definitely, I would say there has been great strides in that area, but there's a lot more that can be done, because the reality is that women still shoulder so much more on their plate than their male counterparts.
Absolutely, Chantal. Khatile, I think there's also an element of classism involved here. I mean, when we talk about supporting female-owned businesses, we think largely of middle-class women who want to start businesses, right? People who may be able to afford access to childcare, transport, all the other issues that make it possible to work. How do we uplift the often disparaged street vendor, for example, who's very much a businesswoman in her own right, but is really disregarded in many ways by the formalized business structures we create?
Thank you very much, Joanne. Indeed, you've struck an important chord there. And I just want to share with you the work that we do at Transport Education Training Authority as an example for how we have made a difference and an impact in supplier development, particularly focusing on those women. Joanne, it's typical that in the male environment, they go to golf courses and they meet at bars and they discuss these business ventures. Or even in the boardroom, they will find ways to support themselves and support each other away from where other genders may be.
Right.
Now, we found out that actually that puts women at the back foot at Transport Education Training Authority, TETA. So what we did was we've always put together town halls. And we call it our own golf course. And we assemble women from far and wide. So we go from region to region. And we get partners from financial institutions to come in and share how they could support these women. We also get people who are already in businesses, other women who have ventured into the business and are successful, to come and share stories of how they got it right and share to these women so that they can be encouraged. But we also then bring all these other people and other linkages and create linkages for these women to support them so that when they leave, they find something important and they start something important. And I want to share with you one very good story that the impact that we created in the taxi industry, the male-dominated industry. Women that are there mostly take up from their husbands who've passed away. Now already they're at the back foot and they need to carry on the business and venture into this male-dominated, which is always barricaded by all sorts and forms of barricading to stop women from venturing in. What we did was we partnered with the regional or the provincial taxi council. Now that was in Northwest and in Free State. So that's the first type and the first kind. So it's our flagship project. And we started a small business development program for these women. You must remember, Joanne, that they owned a fleet of taxis. They are not structured as a business. They are not registered as a business, so they do not comply with many other legal authorities that they need to comply with, be it SARS, be it with CIPC. So we took these women because we understood that when you make a difference in the lives of these women, you impact on the society. And we know for sure that when you change the life of a woman, you do make a positive impact in the society. Now, we wanted to also change the taxi industry. We know that they would take their learnings and implant them in the taxi industry. And today, those 100 women who've been supported financially by us through partnerships with organizations in the transport sector, but also across all sectors in ICT and in health. We supported those women to structure their businesses in taxis. They are now structured, they are now organized, they have business cards, they have business development plans that they always show to banks or financial institutions who could support them to grow their businesses. So it's a story that we always look at. And this happened a few months ago, Joanne. The program was for 6 months, but I want to touch on this, that the problems that were festered in there, in the women as drivers at homes, as nurturers, will always work hard and they always face different problems before they could come to the program and attend. We were hit by the pandemic. They had to learn to start using online platforms. And as a woman, I could understand the type of challenge. We always shy away from the technologies, but they had to learn. And when you listen to their stories, when they say to you, I had to learn to use a computer to be able to even draft a statement. And you look at that and you marvel. This is the impact that we wanted to make, particularly in this industry that is always barricaded by men. And we always have those stereotypes to say we may never transform this industry. But we found these women who were already at the back foot, who had to look after the businesses from their husbands. Those businesses may die, who knows? But we took them and we said, you can make a difference. Those women today have got their businesses that are structured and that are organized and they are registered.
Yeah, that's proper skills development. And Sakai, as women rise to positions of power, let's use this example that we've been given by Khatile. I think across the board, no matter what industry you're in, how important is it for you as a woman in leadership of power to dedicate yourself to ensuring other efficient women are given room to grow their skills, to work on their self-development, and also receive recognition and reward for their hard work?
Thank you, Joanne. It's very important. You know, us as women leaders in Africa, we need to be power hungry because that is what is going to drive you to not be afraid to take on the role of being a leader. But one thing that I found, and a lot of research speaks to that point, is that we are scared of being leaders. We don't strive to be a positive change in our professional career. Sometimes we strive to be that in our personal, but unfortunately not in the professional. So gender should never be the end all of whether or not a person can be a great leader. It's your abilities that are entrenched on an individual strength, but also our personal traits as well. So I do think that traits play and skills as well an important role. And I think that speaks to what a lot of our speakers have said. And, I find that often at times people will come to us and say, you need to have this set of skills for you to be an effective woman leader. But there are other skills, soft skills that we never focus on. And those include being vulnerable. How often do you come across a woman leader or a business owner who's vulnerable, right? And I think when you are vulnerable, you show the human side of yourself. Also, as women, and I think this is part of us knowing who we are, and a lot of the speakers have made mention of that. We know that we are multitaskers, so be good at that, but also be collaborative, right? Because at home, you are a mother or you are a spouse or whatever your personal circumstances, right? And you coordinate and you collaborate. So why are you not bringing that into your leadership role? Why are you not ensuring that your team members are collaborative? Then the other point is being opportunity driven. It breaks my heart seeing women, and I'm not just speaking about women leaders, but also business entrepreneurs, not wanting to take hold of an opportunity and running with it. We sometimes wait for that opportunity to be presented to us. What stops you from putting up your hand and saying, hey, I can do this, or hey, I'm going to try and do this? Often at times we'll say, I'm not so sure if I can do this. Let me speak to my mentor. Let me see. So that speaks to the point of being strong willed and purpose driven. We need to be able to connect the dots. We need to be able to ensure that as leaders, we're also transformational. And this is what we need, especially in Africa, right? We are guided by so many barriers. We have so many gaps. So when I see a female leader in a position and all she does is sit there and do nothing, I actually question that because I'm saying you've been given this opportunity. You have the platform to be the driving force of change, and you can't do anything to make sure that I, as an aspiring leader, or I, as a business leader, have an opportunity to tap into the supply chains. Instead, all you're going to do is just be comfortable and not want to challenge the status quo. So I think for me, those are important, especially as we try and navigate very difficult times that we're finding ourselves in. The gender gap is still big. There's a lot that needs to be done, right? But the only way we can propel and excel as women leaders is if we do this with strength, grace, and composure.
I've never heard the phrase power hungry used in such a positive context before. I buy it, Sakai, I really do. Michal, as someone deeply involved in ensuring there's a diversity of suppliers in the chain, how should large corporates go about ensuring that women-owned businesses access opportunities?
Thanks, Joanne. As big corporate, it has to be an intentional, strategic objective within the organization. And APSA has proved that in their endeavors towards ensuring that women-owned businesses have access to the market. As you're aware, 30% of organizations, private-owned organizations worldwide, are owned by women. Yet only 1% of corporate spend are with these women-owned businesses. And at ABSA, the numbers are staggeringly different. Currently, we are 25% of spend with women-owned businesses, which equates to roughly 1.9 billion for this year. And the supply diversity work I do is driven by my passion to empower women through entrepreneurship and in so doing create jobs. And we have actively gone about setting aside work that should be given to women. And I think my panelists have mentioned this as well. It's absolutely imperative to also couple that with business development support, with looking at the different facets that are needed in order for an entrepreneur to succeed. And we particularly use tools and technology to enhance our contribution to these business owners. Coaching and mentorship, I can't say enough about that. It's absolutely important for women to be balanced in the way they run their business and the way they run the rest of their life. As has been mentioned, women shoulder a lot of responsibilities being an entrepreneur. And how does a corporate organization support that goal? Market access is one of them. Access to finance is another huge stumbling block for all entrepreneurs, and it's not unique to women entrepreneurs. But then, of course, coupling that with how do we create a sustainable organization? So coming on to our supply diversity program is step one. But graduating from the supply diversity program as a sustainable organization, now that's where the winning formula comes in, because we need to have developed a supplier that can walk out of ABSA without having a concentration risk that's dependent on ABSA's market access, but rather that we've created a business that's able to tap into the market holistically within the economy and not just limited to South Africa, but even beyond the borders of South Africa. And ABSA is doing that by being deliberate and intentional and strategic, and having the support of both our leadership as well as the financial backing. And I have to be honest, as a woman, and as I realized that having my goals and purpose aligned and values is absolutely important for me in order to raise children, obviously, that can replicate those values and also create a world that's better to live in. And ABSA has given me that opportunity, and I never ever expected that I'd be in the corporate world, living out both my passion and my values with the support of a big organization like ABSA.
Thank you so much for that, Michal. So let's take some of the excellent questions that are coming through on the live chat. Thank you so much for sending those through. Putela, I'm going to start with your question, and Khatile, maybe you can grab this one for me. Are women innately risk averse in business, or is that a learned behavior when there are so many barriers?
Yeah, thank you, Joanne and Putela. And I've heard a lot about this, but I also want to look at myself. I think we are risk averse. And I think it is just that quality of us that is to do with nurturing the family, and you will always protect your family so that you don't venture into decisions that are very risky. So it does not mean that we do not take risks. We do take risks, but we take calculated risks to protect our own.
So you think, I mean, that's an interesting thing, because it says to me that that's a result of socialization. It's not necessarily in our nature. I mean, I think some of us are risk takers. If you look at the number of women who do crazy things like go bungee jumping, for argument's sake, right? There are many of us who are drawn to that kind of thing. But perhaps it's our socialization that tells us, you know, you should try and dampen that just a little bit, temper it, because it could land you in trouble if you're too too open to risk taking, perhaps.
Absolutely. If you went to the other end of risk taking, maybe you may end up with consequences that you may not like or that may impact on you negatively. But you are right, Joanne. Talking about bungee jumping, I also did skydiving. So you
Why am I not surprised?
You do take risks, but you take calculated risks.
Yeah. So, Sikai, let me ask you this question, a good one from Margs, who says, so keen to hear their different view on the legitimacy of women in leadership. And Margs, I hope that you have enjoyed hearing these perspectives so far. But Margs goes on to ask, what do you think it is that women want from business to support their legitimacy as leaders? Sikai?
Thank you. So there's quite a lot. And I think in answering this question, I want to touch on the research that Andy has done, because we do focus on a lot of gender equality initiatives across the board. So what we have found in our research is that women want, the promotion of investments and effective support services for women-led businesses. I'm now talking from an entrepreneurial perspective, which also includes elements of leadership. Also, women want we want improvement of gender inclusive employment policies, but also we want to increase the development of women in leadership roles and also ensure that they are gender sensitive policies for employees at all levels. Often at times, and Katila, she's a HR practitioner, it starts with that. It starts with having the essential components that relate to gender sensitivity. Earlier on, we were remarking with Chantal that we love her background. She is sitting in her son's room. That is woman empowerment. She's not had to blur her background or anything, but she's shown who she is. Then also what's important, and this is from our research, is that we want to scale gender-focused business models. And this is through the integration of women-owned or led businesses into corporate supply chains, also distribution channels, but also we want goods and services that are beneficial to women and girls. So I've tried to answer this question with a leadership component, but also a business and entrepreneurial flair to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Sikai. And Michal, maybe I can bring you in here to ask another question from Margs, because you're probably in a company that is very focused on this. I think ABSA certainly gives the impression of being very intentional as to placing women in leadership positions, strong women who lead the company. But this is probably not true of all corporates. I mean, Margs asked how to get corporate spend to focus on women-owned businesses for access to markets, finance, support services, and business development. How do we get all, not just corporates, but because government is doing business too, wherever you are in a position to look for suppliers and introduce them into your chain, how do you guarantee that an organization is committed to that in a country where women are the majority?
I think, Joanne, it's certainly important for us to have policy that drives this. And having our financial sector code does certainly put an emphasis on including women-owned businesses, but I think it needs to go beyond that. Corporates need to make the decision that their policy needs to align to diversity and inclusion, not just to tick the box on a BE scorecard, but because it's the right thing to do. And including women in your supply chain directly impacts the socioeconomic challenges that we face around education, around unemployment, around inequality. So it's definitely something that must be driven by strategy and policy that, importantly, what ABSA is doing with the ABSA Business Day Supply Development Awards is cultivating some good corporate competition, encouraging other corporates to also show up, encouraging other corporates to be able to tell their stories, to tell the stories of the entrepreneurs that they've been able to support, to showcase them. And this is also multifaceted, because not only are we sharing the stories, but we are indirectly creating market access as well. And as a sponsor of these awards, that's the intention that ABSA wants to create, because we also have identified that we're not doing enough. The fact that we're still sitting at the 1% of corporate spend going to is not sufficient. We just aren't getting the traction that we need to get. And you're quite right. it has to be a corporate agenda item that spans across all business and not just limited to particular organization.
Yeah. Violet, I'm very interested to hear your take on the issue of male allies, Violet, because you brought this up a little bit earlier on, and you know I think we don't talk enough about you know whether we do have men within the corporate space, within the civil society space, within the government space, who actually do support sufficiently the idea of a women empowerment within those organizations. Do we need those male allies, Violet? Or do we just bulldoze and make our own way?
Thank you very much. Yes, we do need those male allies, and sometimes, yes, we need to bulldoze. So, with my background, in 2018, I won the SAB Kickstart competition, and they said my award was the most persistent entrepreneur who kicks doors open and all that. And yes, sometimes you go and knock, and not even sometimes, yes, we do go and knock and get stores closed, and they tell you they already have the people. Sometimes you go and you compete, especially now with the trucking industry. You're competing against the big names, and then now who are you? They want this and that. But yes, we would appreciate those male allies and female allies, but don't wait for them to be part of your team. Continue kicking doors, continue bulldozing. Yeah. So one thing that I tell the entrepreneurs that I mentor is that if the door doesn't open, go through the window. If the window doesn't open, go through the roof. If the roof doesn't open, go underground like a mole, but just find your way in. So yes, we would highly appreciate the allies, but like I said, and we were chatting with a friend this morning to say one thing that I've learned from interacting and going outside of South Africa, also with business, is interacting with other entrepreneurs and seeing how determined they are. And by going out, I realized how spoiled we are as South Africans in general, from the grants to the ECGCs to the Fetulas giving us money. We are very spoiled. So, but it takes going out to realize how blessed slash spoiled that we are. So from interacting with other entrepreneurs, for instance, I went to Nigeria and they can hardly access business loans or even loans in general. And I went to Kenya, I went to other countries, and I realized, shucks, they have it hard here. And yet they're still thriving. And it's from just benchmarking from those other entrepreneurs and saying, no, I'm not going to wait for government to do anything for me. I'm not going to wait for allies to give away. It's benefit. If they do, let it be a cherry on top. But it is your business. Take yourself seriously and go and knock on those doors. So that's my response. So we need both, but the greater percentage must be go and bulldoze.
Violet, it's a terrifying prospect in some ways because, I mean, you may have a great business idea. Once a number of doors are shut in your face as a woman, you may simply feel that you were never cut out for this. How does a woman, particularly women who are surrounded by people who entrench that patriarchy socially, how does one begin to pull away from that, to extricate oneself from that kind of stereotype that actually women don't belong in business, that this is too difficult, that breaking into these industries is beyond them? How do you overcome that, just from a most human point of view?
Thank you very much. I believe that we as women, we are more persistent, we are more resilient, we go through the most, but yet you still keep standing. So another thing that I believe and I've seen about women all over the world is that for us, our economic wellness is more, it's very important, and we have to fight to make it work. So even if they close that door, remember we as women, we are natural nurturers, like Hatili mentioned, that you want to protect your own, but not just your own. Even when you see the neighbor's kid hungry, you want to. So we have a nurturing spirit, and we have a lot at risk to just allow it or give up and not let it work. So I think because of that nurturing spirit, that thing we have as women that we want to take care and protect, we have a lot at risk that will not allow us to just rest and say, I don't think this is meant for it, or maybe it's not going to work. Say, let those objections, take them as feedback. And so if they say, no, I'm not interested, or I already have a transport provider, okay, find out what is it that, take the feedback. Maybe they said, no, it's because you're like this or like that. take those rejections, less objections, and use them to say, let me go and improve myself. Because for me, if a company says no, for instance, I say, okay, so what is it that made me fail or not get this opportunity? I'm those weird entrepreneurs who say, tell me why you didn't give me the job. So that, because your feedback will help me to improve whatever it is. So now, because I tell them, I really want to do business with you. So please give me feedback. It's okay, you've awarded it to somebody else. Why didn't I get it? Give me feedback that will help me. And that is where enterprise development comes into play. Give me feedback and then help me to get there. If you say I have one less truck or whatever the case is, the space of enterprise development, yes, is to help me. If you say my safety file is not to scratch or whatever it is, that feedback must be, there must be an engagement. And then through the corporate enterprise development, then that's where they should help us to be able to meet those criteria.
Really constructive advice there. Thank you so much for that, Violet. And of course, companies all over the continent and the world that take women in leadership seriously are benefiting from women's perspectives, emotional and social intelligence, and ability to multitask, apart from many other skills. It's an important conversation to have, especially in our country, where women often bear the brunt during the toughest economic times, but still display the ability to put bread on the table. It's time we harness that ability. On that note, we'll wrap it up there for today. If you need to refer back to any of the information we've covered, you can watch a recording of our discussion on YouTube and Business Day TV. Don't forget, the entries for 2021 are open and companies can go to www.sdawards.co.za to enter. Thank you to our panel members for their important insights, and thank you for watching today. Many thanks to Averse for partnering with Business Day to dialogues to highlight this crucial issue. We'll be back with another thought-provoking conversation soon. Till then, from me, Joanne Joseph, take care and keep safe. Bye-bye.